The first notice appeared on my windshield 3 hours after I installed the car cover, and I knew immediately this was not about rules. My name does not matter, but my job does. I am a network engineer, which means I spend my days watching access logs and audit trails, tracking who touched what and when. I moved to Saddlebrook Master Association in San Diego, California 2 years ago because the golf course community looked pristine and professional, the kind of place where a work-from-home tech contractor could park a company vehicle without drama. The HOA seemed reasonable on paper. I was wrong. What was at stake for me was simple and non-negotiable. My work depends on being able to park a work vehicle, and the Saddlebrook board was now targeting it with the kind of manufactured urgency that only exists when someone wants you gone. The notice was printed on Saddlebrook letterhead with a violation code I had never seen before. Unauthorized vehicle covering. Immediate removal required or towing authorized within 24 hours. I read it twice standing in my driveway while freezing rain started tapping the clear vinyl cover I had just strapped over the sedan. The car was a company lease. The cover was a $50 temporary shell designed to protect paint and glass during ice storms. I had checked the covenants before buying it. There was no restriction on car covers. There was a restriction on permanent carport structures, but this was a tarp with bungee cords. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos of the notice, then checked the timestamp on my doorbell camera. The notice had been placed at 6:42 in the morning. I had installed the cover at 3:30 the previous afternoon. 15 hours. Whoever wrote this had been watching. I walked up my driveway and turned toward the street. Across the cul-de-sac, Wendy Whitman stood beside her mailbox holding a stainless travel mug in one gloved hand and staring directly at me. She wore a teal-belted wool coat and red earmuffs, and her dark brown tight curls were pulled back tight enough that I could see the tension in her jaw from 30 feet away. Wendy was the Rules Interpretation Chair for the Saddlebrook Master Association Board, a title she had invented for herself after joining the board 18 months ago. She claimed she had written the covenants herself during a revision process that I had never seen documented in any meeting minutes. I waved. She did not wave back. Instead, she turned and walked toward her driveway, her boots crunching through the salt I had spread on the sidewalk earlier that morning. I went inside and opened my laptop. The Saddlebrook covenants were hosted on the management company portal, a clunky password-protected site that crashed half the time. I logged in and pulled up the vehicle section. Section 12, subsection 4. No permanent structures, canopies, or carports shall be erected in driveways or yards without written approval. Temporary protective coverings during inclement weather are permitted provided they do not remain in place longer than 72 consecutive hours. I screenshotted the text and emailed it to myself. Then I checked the board meeting minutes archive. The most recent upload was from October, 4 months ago. The minutes mentioned a discussion about holiday decorations and a vote to prohibit inflatable lawn displays, but there was nothing about car covers. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Saddlebrook Management reminding you that your vehicle covering violates Section 12.4 and must be removed by 6 p.m. today or towing will proceed. A fine of $250 has been assessed. I stared at the message. The fine had appeared without a vote, without a hearing, without any process. That was escalation step 1. I replied, Section 12.4 permits temporary coverings during inclement weather. This covering was installed yesterday, and the forecast calls for freezing rain through tomorrow. Please provide documentation of any recent amendment. The reply came back in under a minute. The Rules Interpretation Chair has determined that your covering does not qualify as temporary due to its size and attachment method. The fine stands. Payment is due within 10 days or a lien will be filed. I took a screenshot of the exchange and added it to a folder I had started 6 months ago when Wendy had sent me a warning letter about parking my work van in the driveway overnight. That warning had gone nowhere because the covenants explicitly allowed 2 vehicles per household, regardless of type. But the letter had stayed in my file because the tone had been strange. Hostile. Personal. I needed to be on the road before the next round of freezing rain hit. The company had a fiber installation job in Carlsbad starting at 8 the next morning, and the van was loaded with equipment worth $40,000. If the HOA towed the sedan, I would have no backup transport and no way to move the gear if the van had trouble. I grabbed my coat and walked outside. The sky was the color of old concrete, and the temperature had dropped another 5 degrees since sunrise. I checked the car cover. It was secure, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Ice was already forming on the vinyl surface instead of on the windshield underneath. A white pickup truck turned onto our street and slowed as it passed my house. I recognized the logo on the door, Jensen Towing. The driver was a heavy-set guy in his 50s with a blonde beard and a reflective vest. He looked at my driveway, looked at a clipboard on his passenger seat, then kept driving to the end of the cul-de-sac and turned around. He pulled up alongside me and rolled down his window. "You the one with the covered car?" I nodded. He sighed and shook his head. "Look, I got a standing order from the HOA to be on standby for a tow today at 6 p.m. if that cover is still on. I am telling you this because I think it is garbage. I have done 3 calls for this HOA in the last 2 months, and every single one has been some petty nonsense where the homeowner did not even know they were in violation until I showed up with the hook. What happens if I leave the cover on?" He shrugged. "I hook it, I tow it to the impound lot on Miramar, and you pay $325 plus daily storage to get it back. And the HOA still fines you." I looked back at my house, then at the truck. "You ever tow a car that was actually illegally parked?" He laughed, short and bitter. "Not for this HOA. They call me for cars that are an inch over the driveway line, for trailers that have current registration, for landscaping trucks that are unloading. I take the jobs because I need the work, but I am not proud of it." I appreciated the honesty. "What is your name?" "Rick. Jensen Towing." "Rick, if I can prove this tow order is retaliation and not a real violation, would you be willing to say that on record?" He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I would. Because if I do not, this HOA is going to keep doing this to people, and eventually someone is going to sue me for facilitating it." I thanked him, and he drove off. I went back inside and opened my email. I found the contact information for the Saddlebrook Management Company, a firm called Prestige Community Services that handled 6 HOAs in North County. I drafted a formal records request under California Civil Code Section 5200, asking for copies of all board meeting minutes from the past 12 months, all email correspondence related to vehicle coverings, and any amendments or rule changes adopted since the current covenants were published. I sent the email at 10:15. By noon, I had a reply. "Your request has been received. Please remit a processing fee of $75 to cover copying and administrative costs. Records will be provided within 10 business days of payment." That was escalation step 2. A retaliatory records denial unless I paid bogus copy fees. I called the management company directly. A young woman answered, her voice bright and professional. "Prestige Community Services, this is Angela." I explained the situation. I explained that California law allows HOAs to charge only actual costs, not arbitrary fees, and that electronic records requests carry no copying cost. I explained that I was being fined for something the covenants permitted, and that I needed the minutes to verify whether any rule change had actually been voted on. Angela put me on hold. Soft jazz played for 4 minutes. When she came back, her tone had changed. "Sir, I am going to need to escalate this to our senior manager. Can you hold?" I held. Another 3 minutes. Then a man picked up, older voice, clipped and annoyed. "This is Derek Palmer, regional manager. What is the issue?" I repeated everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a few seconds. "Mister, I am going to be straight with you. Saddlebrook is one of our most difficult accounts. The board chair, Wendy Whitman, submits violation reports almost daily, and she has threatened to fire us twice in the last year when we did not process them fast enough. If she says something is a violation, we send the notice. That is our contract. So you do not verify whether the violation is real." He sighed. "We verify against what the board tells us is policy. If the board says a rule has changed, we enforce it. If you want to challenge it, you do that with the board, not with us. Has the board actually changed the rule about car covers? Silence. Then, I do not have access to that information right now. You will need to submit your records request, and we will process it in accordance with the timeline I provided. Which means you are stalling. Mister, I am trying to do my job. If you have a complaint about the board, take it up at the next meeting. When is the next meeting? He paused. I heard keyboard clicks. February 4th. That is 3 weeks away. Correct. And the tow order is for today. He did not respond to that. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the faint hum of office background noise. I said, if you proceed with this tow and I can prove it was retaliatory and unsupported by any actual rule change, I am filing a complaint with the Department of Real Estate and naming Prestige Community Services as a co-respondent. Do you understand? Another pause. Then, quietly, I will put a hold on the tow order for 48 hours while we review your request. But I am not making any promises. He hung up. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. 48 hours. That gave me until Friday at noon. The freezing rain was supposed to clear by Thursday night, but the forecast was updating every few hours and the roads were already a mess. I needed the cover to stay on through at least tomorrow, and I needed proof that Wendy had overstepped. I went back to the doorbell camera footage and scrubbed through the previous 2 weeks. Wendy appeared in frame 11 times. Twice she had walked past my house slowly, looking at my driveway. 3 times she had stopped at the mailbox cluster and stared directly at my front door. On January 8th, she had walked up my driveway, stood beside my car for 40 seconds, then walked back to the street. She had not knocked. She had not left a note. She had just stood there, looking. I downloaded all 11 clips and saved them with timestamps. Then I checked my own sidewalk clearing timeline. The HOA snow policy required sidewalks to be cleared within 12 hours of the end of snowfall. The last snow had stopped at 2 p.m. on Monday. I had cleared and salted by 3:15. I had photos with metadata to prove it. But the sidewalk was clear only until the wind started drifting snow back across it, a side complication that made Wendy act like I had done nothing. I went outside to check. The walk was mostly clear, but a thin skim of windblown powder had collected near the curb. I grabbed the shovel from the garage and cleared it again, then spread another line of calcium chloride dicer. I took another photo. Timestamp, 1:32 p.m., January 15th. When I turned around, Wendy was standing at the end of my driveway. She did not say hello. She said, "You were notified that the car cover is a violation. It is still in place." I leaned the shovel against the garage door. The covenants permit temporary covers during weather events. This qualifies. She smiled, thin and cold. I wrote the interpretation guidelines for the vehicle section. Temporary means a cover used during active precipitation, removed immediately after. Yours has been in place overnight. The rain has not stopped. The forecast calls for more freezing rain tonight. She took a sip from the mug, her eyes never leaving mine. I have already spoken to the attorney. The fine stands and the tow order is active. If the cover is not removed by 6 p.m., your vehicle will be impounded. I pulled out my phone and opened the covenant text. I read aloud, temporary protective coverings during inclement weather are permitted provided they do not remain in place longer than 72 consecutive hours. She waved a hand dismissively. That language is outdated. The board adopted a clarification last fall. Show me the meeting minutes. Her smile widened. Say whatever you want, I have it all in writing. I felt the temperature drop another degree, or maybe that was just my blood going cold. Because that line, that exact phrase, was going to come back to haunt her. I did not know it yet, but I would remember it. I said, I submitted a records request this morning. I am waiting for the minutes. She tilted her head. You will get them when the processing fee is paid. That is policy. The processing fee is illegal under California law. Prestige knows that. She shrugged. Then take it up with Prestige. My job is to enforce the rules. I took a breath and kept my voice level. Wendy, I am not trying to fight with you. I am trying to follow the rules. If there was a clarification adopted, I need to see it so I can comply. That is reasonable. Her expression hardened. What is reasonable is respecting the authority of this board. I have been a homeowner in Saddlebrook for 9 years. I served on the architectural committee before I joined the board. I know these rules better than anyone, including you. The cover comes off or the car gets towed. Your choice. She turned and walked back toward the street, boots leaving prints in the fresh powder I had just cleared. I stood there holding my phone, watching her disappear around the corner. Then I went back inside and called my attorney. His name was Martin Cross, a real estate lawyer in Encinitas who had helped me close on the house. I explained the situation in 2 minutes. He listened, asked 3 questions, then gave me his opinion. You are right about the records fee. That is a shakedown. You are right about the covenant language. If they adopted a clarification, it has to be in the minutes, and it has to follow proper notice procedure. If it is not documented, it does not exist. But here is the problem. Even if you are right, the tow company does not care. If the HOA gives the order, they will hook your car and you will spend $300 getting it back while you fight the fine in small claims. So what do I do? He paused. You have 48 hours? Until Friday noon. Prestige put a hold on the tow. Good. Use that time to document everything. If they tow you after that, file a police report for theft and then file in small claims for the tow cost, the fine, and your attorney fees. But if you can avoid the tow, do it. The impound lot is not climate controlled and your company is not going to love their vehicle sitting in slush for 3 days. What about the records request? Push harder. If Prestige does not comply, file a complaint with the Department of Real Estate and copy the HOA board on it. That usually gets management companies moving because DRE complaints go on their license record. I thanked him and hung up. Then I drafted a second email to Prestige, this time copying Derek Palmer, Angela, and the generic Saddlebrook board address. I cited Section 5200 again, attached a PDF of the statute, and stated that I would file a DRE complaint if the records were not provided without fee by end of business Thursday. I hit send at 2 p.m. By 2:45, I had a reply from Derek Palmer. We are reviewing your request and will respond by Thursday at 5 p.m. Good enough. I had 1 day to prepare. I spent Wednesday afternoon building a timeline. I pulled every piece of documentation I had, the covenant text, the violation notice, the doorbell camera clips, my sidewalk clearing photos, the text message exchange with Prestige, my email records request. I organized it all into a single PDF with timestamps and page numbers. 42 pages. I saved 3 copies, one on my laptop, one on a USB drive, and one in my cloud storage. Then I went back to the doorbell footage and watched the January 8th clip again, the one where Wendy had walked up my driveway and stood beside my car. I slowed it down and zoomed in. She had not touched the car. She had not left anything. But she had taken out her phone and held it up, angled toward my front window. She had been filming or photographing my house. The timestamp read January 8th, 4:27 p.m. I scrubbed forward. At 4:29, she turned and walked back to the street. At 4:31, she stopped at the mailbox cluster and made a phone call. I could not hear the audio, but I could see her mouth moving and her free hand gesturing sharply. I saved the clip. Thursday morning arrived with sleet and another 2 inches of snow. The weather report said the freezing rain would start again by evening. I cleared my sidewalk at 7 a.m., spread dicer, and took photos. By 7:45, the wind had pushed a thin skim of snow back across the concrete. I cleared it again at 8:30. More photos. At 9, I received an email from Prestige. It was from Angela, not Derek. Attached, please find the requested board meeting minutes. No processing fee has been charged per your citation of Civil Code 5200. Please let us know if you need anything else. I opened the attachment. It was a scanned PDF of 12 months of minutes, poorly formatted and partially illegible. I started reading. October meeting, discussion of holiday decorations. Vote to ban inflatables. Motion carried 4-1. September meeting, budget discussion, landscaping contract renewal, no rules changes. August meeting, complaint about a basketball hoop, tabled for further review. July meeting, nothing relevant. I kept scrolling. Then I found it. November meeting minutes, page 3. Under new business, discussion of temporary vehicle coverings. Board member Whitman proposes clarification to section 12.4 to define temporary as during active precipitation only, not to exceed 12 hours. Motion fails for lack of a second. I read it again. Motion fails for lack of a second. Wendy had tried to change the rule. The board had refused. And then she had enforced the change anyway, as if the vote had passed. I screenshotted the page and added it to my timeline PDF. Now I had proof that contradicted what Wendy claimed was voted on. That was my evidence type, board meeting minutes that directly refuted her authority. But I was not ready to deploy it yet. I took the fine notice without flinching, because I knew what it would trigger. If I played this right, Wendy would keep escalating, and every escalation would create more evidence. I needed her to commit fully before I revealed what I had. I saved the updated timeline and checked the clock. 11 a.m. The tow hold expired at noon the next day. I had 25 hours. I decided to go on the offensive. I drafted an email to the full Saddlebrook board using the directory from the management portal. Subject line: Request for emergency board review of retaliatory fine and tow threat. I kept it professional and factual. I attached the timeline PDF. I cited the covenant text, the November minutes showing the failed motion, and the text messages showing the fine had been assessed without a vote. I requested an emergency meeting or a formal reversal of the fine and tow order before the Friday deadline. I sent it at 11:30 a.m. Thursday. By noon, I had replies from 2 board members. One was a terse acknowledgement, received, will review. The other was more interesting. It came from a board member named Colin Archer, whose title was listed as Treasurer. I reviewed your attachment. The November motion you reference is accurate, and I was present for that meeting. I was not aware that a fine had been issued under a rule change that did not pass. I am forwarding this to our management company and our attorney for clarification. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I felt a flicker of hope. Colin was not an ally yet, but he was at least willing to look at facts. At 1 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice, sharp and fast. This is Wendy Whitman. I just received your email to the board, and I need to inform you that your characterization of the November meeting is incorrect. The motion was tabled, not failed, and the board authorized me to implement interim enforcement guidelines pending further review. I kept my voice calm. The minutes say the motion failed for lack of a second. That means it did not pass. There is no mention of tabling or interim enforcement. She did not miss a beat. The minutes were summarized for brevity. The full discussion included a consensus that I would handle interpretation on a case-by-case basis until the next revision cycle. Do you have documentation of that consensus? Silence. Then, I do not need documentation. I was there. I am the rules chair. Wendy, if the board gave you enforcement authority, that would be in the minutes. If it is not in the minutes, it did not happen. Her voice went ice cold. I have already spoken to the attorney. You are in violation and you will be towed unless you comply. This conversation is over. She hung up. I sat down and added the phone call to my timeline notes. Then I checked the weather. The freezing rain was starting early. The first drops were already ticking against the window. At 3 p.m., I went outside to check the car cover. It was holding up well, shedding the ice buildup into the driveway instead of letting it freeze onto the glass. I cleared the driveway apron and spread more dicer. The sidewalk was drifting again. I cleared it for the 3rd time and took another timestamp photo. When I looked up, Wendy was walking toward me from across the street. She had the stainless mug in one hand and her phone in the other. She stopped at the edge of my driveway and held up her phone, screen facing me. I have photographic evidence that your vehicle cover has been in place for over 48 hours. That exceeds the temporary threshold even under the old language. I checked my watch. It has been 36 hours, and the weather event has not ended. She shook her head. The rain stopped this morning. It is sleeting right now. She ignored that. I am also documenting that your sidewalk is not in compliance. There is visible snow accumulation. I just cleared it 10 minutes ago. The wind is drifting it back. That is not my problem. The policy is clear. 12 hours after snowfall ends, sidewalks must be clear and remain clear. The snowfall has not ended. She raised the phone higher and took a photo of me, then another of the sidewalk. I am filing a secondary violation for negligent snow removal. That is another $250 fine. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my tone even. You are going to fine me for wind? I am going to fine you for failing to maintain a clear pedestrian path. The rules do not make exceptions for weather. I pointed at the fresh line of dicer I had just spread. The path is clear. You are standing on it. She glanced down, frowned, then looked back at me. It was not clear when I walked past earlier. When was that? She did not answer. Instead, she turned and took another photo of my car. Then she said, "The tow truck will be here at 6 p.m. tomorrow unless this cover is removed. I suggest you make arrangements." She walked away before I could respond, her boots crunching through the salt she claimed was not there. I went back inside and checked my email. Still nothing from Prestige except the hold confirmation. I opened the timeline PDF and added the new interaction, Wendy photographic harassment, 3 p.m. Thursday, sidewalk clear with evidence. Then I sat down and thought about the trump card I had been holding. The doorbell camera clip from January 8th. Wendy walking up my driveway, filming my house, making a phone call. It was not dramatic on its own, but combined with the timeline of violation notices and the failed motion in the November minutes, it painted a picture. A picture of someone who had decided I was a problem and was manufacturing violations to force me out. But I was not ready to deploy it yet. I needed one more piece. I opened the November meeting minutes again and read them carefully. The scan quality was poor and the formatting was inconsistent, but I noticed something strange. The page numbers jumped. Page 2 was followed by page 4. Page 3 was missing. I zoomed in on the footer. Each page had a tiny timestamp in the corner, almost illegible. Page 2, November 14th, 2024, 9:47 p.m. Page 4, November 14th, 2024, 9:52 p.m. I opened the file properties. The PDF had been created on November 15th at 10 a.m., but the modification date was December 2nd. Someone had edited the minutes after the meeting. I sat back and stared at the screen. If page 3 was missing and the file had been modified 3 weeks after the meeting, then the original version might still exist somewhere. In an email attachment. In a backup. In the management company server. I forwarded the minutes PDF to Martin Cross with a note. Check the modification date and the missing page. Something was deleted. He replied in 20 minutes. Good catch. If you can get the original file, this could be evidence of falsification. Do you have a source at the management company? I thought about Angela, the young woman who had answered my first call. She had sounded uncomfortable when Derek took over. I decided to try. I called Prestige again and asked for Angela. She picked up after 2 rings. Hi, this is Angela. Angela, this is the homeowner from Saddlebrook who called yesterday about the records request. I wanted to follow up. Oh. Yes. We sent the minutes this morning. You did, thank you. But I noticed the November file has a missing page and a modification date 3 weeks after the meeting. I am wondering if you have the original version that was submitted by the board secretary. She hesitated. I would need to check with Derek. I understand. But I am asking you directly because I think someone altered the minutes to cover up a failed vote. If that is true, and Prestige provided the altered version without verifying it, that is a liability issue for your company. Silence. I could hear her breathing, the faint click of a keyboard. Then, quietly, "Hold on." She put me on hold. This time there was no jazz, just dead air. I waited. 3 minutes later, she came back. I found the original email from the board secretary. It was sent November 15th at 9 a.m. The attachment is a different file. I am sending it to you now. Thank you, Angela. She hung up without saying anything else. The email arrived at 3:51 p.m. The attachment was labeled Saddlebrook_November_minutes_final.pdf. I opened it. Page 3 was there. It contained the full discussion of the temporary vehicle covering clarification. Wendy had proposed the 12-hour limit. Board member Colin Archer had questioned whether it was enforceable during multi-day storms. Board member Lisa Tran had said it was overly restrictive and would create unnecessary complaints. The motion was called. Wendy voted in favor. No one else did. Motion fails for lack of a second. Then, below that, a second paragraph. Board member Whitman requests that the failed motion be stricken from the record to avoid confusion. Board declines. Secretary directed to include full discussion in official minutes. I read it 3 times. Wendy had asked them to delete it. They had refused. So she had done it herself. I printed both versions of the minutes, the altered one and the original, and highlighted the differences. Then I updated my timeline PDF with a new section, evidence of falsified records. I included screenshots of the file properties, the missing page, and the modification dates. Now I had everything. The failed motion, the altered minutes, the timeline of harassment, the doorbell clips, and the trump card I had been holding, a time-stamped clip showing Wendy moving or placing a notice to frame me. I went back to the January 8th footage one more time and watched it in full resolution. Wendy walked up the driveway at 4:27 p.m. She stopped beside my car. She pulled something from her coat pocket, a small white rectangle. She placed it on my windshield, then immediately picked it back up and put it back in her pocket. She looked around, looked directly at my doorbell camera, then walked back to the street. She had staged a test run. I downloaded the clip in high resolution and saved it with a file name that included the timestamp. Then I added it to the timeline PDF as the final entry. Exhibit 12. Video evidence of board member Whitman conducting surveillance and testing violation notice placement 6 days before first official notice. I was ready. Friday morning came with clear skies and brutal cold. The freezing rain had stopped overnight, but the roads were glazed with black ice. I checked the weather radar. Another system was moving in Saturday, which meant I still needed the car cover. At 8 a.m., I received an email from Derek Palmer at Prestige. Per our review, the fine issued on January 14 is rescinded and the tow order is canceled. The board will discuss vehicle covering policy at the February meeting. Please remove the covering once weather conditions improve. I read it twice. Then I checked the CC line. The email had been sent to the full Saddlebrook board, including Wendy. I replied, "Thank you for the clarification. I will remove the covering when the weather event concludes and roads are safe." I did not mention the altered minutes. I did not mention the timeline. I was waiting for Wendy to make the next move. She did not make me wait long. At 9:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Wendy stood on my porch with 2 other people, a man in his 60s wearing a Saddlebrook polo under a parka, and a younger woman in a puffy vest holding a clipboard. I opened the door but left the screen closed. Wendy smiled, the same thin, cold smile from before. "We are here to conduct a property compliance inspection. This is Bill Hendricks, our architectural committee lead, and Stephanie from Prestige." I looked at Bill and Stephanie. Bill looked uncomfortable. Stephanie looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. I said, "I was not notified of any inspection." Wendy held up her phone. "I sent an email to all homeowners last week. Inspections are being conducted on a rolling basis to ensure covenant compliance before spring." I did not receive an email. She shrugged. "That is not my responsibility. We are here now. Please step aside so we can proceed." I shook my head. You need to schedule inspections in advance. You cannot just show up and demand entry. We are not entering your home. We are inspecting external compliance. Your driveway, your landscaping, your exterior paint. I folded my arms. You are on my porch. That is my property. Wendy's smile disappeared. If you refuse to cooperate, I will note that in my report, and the board will consider it obstruction. Note whatever you want. You are not inspecting anything without proper notice. She turned to Bill. Are you getting this? Bill shifted his weight and looked at his shoes. Wendy, maybe we should come back another time. Wendy spun toward him, her voice rising. We are here now. The policy is clear. Stephanie cleared her throat. Actually, the policy requires 72 hours written notice for inspections unless there is an emergency safety issue. I checked before we left the office. Wendy glared at her. This is a compliance inspection, not a safety inspection. Stephanie did not back down. It still requires notice. Wendy turned back to me. Fine. You will receive formal notice, and we will return Monday. But I am documenting this refusal, and I am recommending an additional fine for non-cooperation. I said nothing. I just stood there and waited. She turned and walked off the porch, Bill and Stephanie following. When they reached the driveway, Wendy stopped and looked back at the car cover. Then she took out her phone and photographed it again. I watched them leave, then closed the door and pulled out my phone. I texted Martin Cross, HOA attempted unscheduled inspection, refused entry, threatened with fine for obstruction, need advice. He replied in 5 minutes. They cannot fine you for refusing an unscheduled inspection. If they try, that is harassment. Document everything and let me know if they follow through. I added the interaction to my timeline. Then I went to my computer and checked the board email directory again. I found Colin Archer's personal email and sent him a direct message. Colin, thank you for your message earlier this week. I wanted to give you a heads up that Wendy just attempted an unscheduled inspection at my home and threatened me with a fine when I refused entry. Prestige confirmed that inspections require 72-hour notice. I am concerned that Wendy is acting outside her authority and that the board may not be aware of the extent of her actions. I have documented everything, and I am happy to share it with you if it would help the board address this situation. I hit send and waited. 20 minutes later, Colin called me. His voice was calm and measured, the voice of someone who had spent a career in finance and did not waste words. I got your email. I also got the timeline you sent to the full board. I have been on this board for 4 years and I have never seen anything like this. Wendy has always been aggressive about enforcement, but this crosses a line. Have you seen the November minutes? The original version? He paused. I saw the version that was uploaded to the portal. It did not include the failed motion. I have the original. The management company sent it to me yesterday. Wendy tried to delete the failed vote. He swore, soft and brief. Can you send me that? I can send you the whole timeline. Altered minutes, doorbell footage, text message evidence, everything. Do it. I am calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. This needs to be addressed before it turns into a lawsuit. I sent him the PDF. Then I sat back and let myself breathe. Friday passed quietly. No tow truck. No new fines. The freezing rain returned in the evening and I left the car cover in place. I cleared the sidewalk twice more and documented it both times. Saturday morning, I received an email from Colin. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Sunday 10 a.m. at the Saddlebrook Clubhouse. You are invited to attend and present your documentation. Wendy has been notified and has indicated she will be there. I replied, I will be there. Sunday morning was clear and cold, the kind of hard, bright cold that makes snow squeak underfoot. I dressed in layers, grabbed my printed timeline, and drove to the clubhouse. The parking lot was half full. I recognized Colin's SUV and Wendy's sedan. Inside, the meeting room was set up with a long table at the front and rows of folding chairs. 5 board members sat at the table: Colin, Lisa Tran, Bill Hendricks, a woman I did not recognize, and Wendy. Wendy sat at the far end, the stainless mug in front of her, her expression blank and controlled. Colin called the meeting to order and explained the situation in 2 minutes. A homeowner has raised concerns about selective enforcement and potentially falsified meeting records. We are here to review the evidence and determine next steps. Wendy spoke immediately. I object to this characterization. I have served this community with integrity for years, and I resent the implication that I have done anything improper. Colin did not look at her. He looked at me. Please present your case. I stood and walked to the front. I had printed 20 copies of the timeline. I handed them out to the board members and to the 3 homeowners sitting in the audience. Then I opened my laptop and connected it to the projector. I started with the covenant text. I showed section 12.4 on the screen and read it aloud. Then I showed the violation notice I had received and the text messages from Prestige. Then I showed the November meeting minutes, both versions. I displayed them side by side on the projector, the altered version with the missing page, the original version with the failed motion. I said, the original minutes show that board member Whitman proposed a rule change in November and the motion failed. The uploaded version deletes that discussion entirely. The file metadata shows the uploaded version was modified on December 2nd, 3 weeks after the meeting. Lisa Tran leaned forward. Wendy, did you edit the minutes? Wendy set the mug down with a sharp clink. I made minor formatting corrections for clarity. That is standard practice. Deleting a failed motion is not a formatting correction. The motion was irrelevant. It did not pass, so there was no reason to clutter the record. Colin cut in, his voice hard. That is not your decision. The secretary records what happened. You do not get to revise history. Wendy's face flushed. I have already spoken to the attorney. The attorney advised that the minutes can be summarized at the discretion of the board. Colin shook his head. Show me that advice in writing. Wendy did not respond. I moved to the next slide, the doorbell camera footage from January 8th. I played it on the projector. Wendy walking up the driveway, standing beside my car, pulling out a small white rectangle, placing it on the windshield, picking it back up, looking at the camera, walking away. I paused the video at the moment she looked directly at the lens. I said, this is 6 days before I received the first violation notice. Board member Whitman was conducting surveillance and testing notice placement. She knew exactly what she was doing. The room went silent. Bill Hendricks stared at the screen. Lisa Tran looked at Wendy. The unrecognized board member, whose name I later learned was Sarah Kim, folded her arms and leaned back in her chair. Wendy stood up. This is a setup. That footage is taken out of context. I kept my voice calm. The timestamp is visible. The metadata is intact. I can provide the original file for independent verification. Wendy turned to Colin. I refuse to participate in this ambush. I am leaving. Colin stood. Wendy, sit down. She did not sit. She grabbed the mug and her coat and walked toward the door. I said, before you go, I want to remind you of something you told me on Tuesday. You said, say whatever you want. I have it all in writing. She stopped at the door, but did not turn around. I continued, you were right, you do have it in writing. You have the altered minutes, you have the violation notices, you have the threats, and now the board has it all too, with timestamps and metadata. So yeah, I said what I wanted, and it is all in writing. She turned, her face red, her hand shaking on the mug. You think you are clever. You think this little presentation makes you the hero. But you do not know what you have started. I looked at Colin. I am filing a formal complaint with the Department of Real Estate for falsified records and retaliatory enforcement. I am also requesting that the board remove Wendy Whitman from any role involving rules interpretation or enforcement. Colin nodded. Noted. Wendy, you are suspended from all board duties pending an investigation. We will notify you of the next steps in writing. Wendy slammed the mug down on the nearest table, liquid sloshing out onto the wood. Then she walked out. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes. Colin moved to rescind both fines. The motion passed 4-0, with Wendy absent. Lisa moved to hire an independent auditor to review all violation notices issued in the last 12 months. That passed unanimously. Sarah Kim, the board member I had not recognized, spoke last. I want to apologize on behalf of the board. This should never have happened. We trusted Wendy to handle enforcement fairly, and we did not verify her actions. That is on us. I appreciated that. I asked what would happen next. Colin said, "We are terminating our contract with Prestige effective end of February. We are going to hire a new management company with stronger oversight protocols. And we are going to revise the enforcement process to require board review before any fine is assessed." I thanked them and left. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the San Diego County Sheriff. Wendy Whitman had been cited for trespass and harassment based on the doorbell footage and the timeline of her visits to my property. The citation included a restraining order prohibiting her from coming within 100 feet of my home. 3 days after that, Prestige sent a final email. The Saddlebrook Master Association has elected to transition management services. Your account has been closed and all fines have been removed. Thank you for your patience during this transition. I took the car cover off that afternoon. The weather had cleared and the roads were dry. I folded the cover and stored it in the garage, knowing I would need it again next winter. Rick from Jensen Towing called me a week later. He said Wendy had tried to place another tow order, this time claiming my work van was parked illegally. He had refused the job and told her he would not be taking any more calls from Saddlebrook. He also said he had been contacted by 2 other HOAs in North County, asking if he had experienced similar issues, and he had referred them to Martin Cross. The February board meeting happened without Wendy. Colin was elected president. Lisa became vice president. They adopted a new enforcement policy requiring photographic evidence, board review, and 72-hour notice before any fine. They also voted to publish all meeting minutes within 5 business days and to prohibit any post-meeting edits without a formal correction process. I attended that meeting and thanked them. Colin shook my hand and said, "You did us a favor. We were asleep at the wheel and it took someone willing to fight back to wake us up." I did not see Wendy again until March. I was leaving for a job site and she was walking past my house on the opposite sidewalk. She did not look at me. She did not slow down. She just kept walking, the stainless mug in her hand, her shoulders tight and her steps quick. I got in my van and drove to work. The Saddlebrook Master Association is quieter now. The new management company sends monthly newsletters and posts minutes within 3 days of every meeting. Violations are rare and enforcement is transparent. I still check my doorbell camera every morning, but it is habit now, not necessity. The car cover is still in my garage. I used it twice more during late-season storms, and no one said a word. And every time I see a stainless travel mug, I think about Wendy standing in my driveway, so sure she had won, so certain that her authority was untouchable. I think about the look on her face when I played that video in front of the board. I think about how fragile power is when it is built on lies. I also think about Rick, the tow truck driver who admitted the HOA kept calling him for sketchy jobs. He lost Saddlebrook as a client, but he gained 3 referrals from homeowners in other communities who needed someone willing to push back. Last I heard, he was doing well. The timeline PDF is still on my laptop. I have not opened it in months, but I have not deleted it either. It sits in a folder labeled Evidence, just in case. Because in a place like Saddlebrook, where status and appearances run everything, the truth is only as strong as the documentation you keep. And I am very, very good at keeping documentation. The snow melted by mid-March. The golf course opened back up, and the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm of landscaping crews and weekend tea times. I still work from home. I still park the company van in my driveway. And I still spread dicer on my sidewalk every time the forecast calls for ice, not because I am afraid of a fine, but because it is the right thing to do. Wendy resigned from the board in April. The resignation letter was brief and did not include an apology. She moved out of Saddlebrook in June. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she bought a condo in Rancho Bernardo, a community with no HOA. I hope she is happy there. I genuinely do. Because holding on to anger and control the way she did is exhausting, and I do not have the energy for it. I have better things to do. I have fiber lines to run and access logs to monitor, and a quiet house in a neighborhood that finally learned what oversight means. The sidebar complication, the drifting snow that kept covering my sidewalk no matter how many times I cleared it, taught me something useful. You cannot control the wind. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control people who are determined to see you fail. But you can control the evidence. You can control the timeline. You can control the moment when you stop reacting and start presenting the facts in a way that even people who hate drama cannot ignore. That is what I did on that Sunday morning in the clubhouse. I presented it as a timeline so the facts were undeniable. I did not yell. I did not argue. I just showed them what happened, step by step, with timestamps and metadata and video evidence. And the room turned. That is the power of documentation. That is the power of staying calm when someone is trying to provoke you into making a mistake. That is the power of knowing that the truth, when it is organized and clear and indisputable, is louder than any accusation. I still live in Saddlebrook. I still pay my HOA dues. I still attend meetings when something important is on the agenda. But I do not worry about Wendy anymore. I do not worry about manufactured violations or surprise inspections or tow trucks on standby. Because the board knows what I know. The management company knows what I know. And everyone who was in that room on that Sunday morning knows what happens when you build authority on lies and someone finally calls your bluff. The car cover is in my garage, folded neatly on a shelf beside my toolbox. I will use it again next winter when the freezing rain comes back, and if anyone has a problem with it, I will pull up section 12.4, show them the weather forecast, and remind them that temporary means temporary, not arbitrary. I learned a lot during those 2 weeks in January. I learned that HOAs are only as fair as the people running them. I learned that management companies will default to whoever yells loudest unless you force them to look at the actual rules. I learned that some people join boards because they want to serve their community, and some people join because they want control. And I learned that the best revenge is not confrontation. It is documentation. It is patience. It is letting someone escalate until they have no room left to retreat, and then showing everyone exactly what they did. Wendy gave me that opportunity. She handed me every piece of evidence I needed. One violation notice at a time, one threatening phone call at a time, one altered document at a time. All I had to do was collect it and wait for the right moment. That moment came on my front porch when she showed up with a surprise inspection crew, so confident in her authority that she did not even consider the possibility that I had been recording everything. The look on her face when Stephanie sided with me was worth every hour I spent building that timeline. The second moment came in the clubhouse when I put the 2 versions of the minutes on the screen, and the room went quiet. That was the moment when Bill looked at his shoes. That was the moment when Lisa leaned forward and asked the question Wendy could not answer. That was the moment when the power shifted. I do not take pleasure in someone else's downfall. I really do not. But I take a lot of satisfaction in knowing that the system worked. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But it worked. The Saddlebrook Master Association is better now. The new management company is responsive. The new enforcement policy is transparent. The board actually reads the minutes before they vote. And I have a folder on my laptop labeled evidence that I will probably never open again, but I will never delete. Because the next time someone tells me they have it all in writing, I will smile and nod and quietly make sure that I do too. The work van is still parked in my driveway. The company renewed my contract. The fiber installation jobs keep coming. And every morning when I check the doorbell camera, I see exactly what I expect to see. An empty porch, a quiet street, and a neighborhood where the rules apply equally because someone finally made sure they did. That someone was me. Not because I wanted to be a hero. Not because I enjoy conflict. But because I knew how to read an access log, and I knew what it meant when someone kept trying to rewrite the record. You cannot rewrite the record when the original is backed up in 3 places and timestamped down to the second. Wendy learned that the hard way. and the Saddlebrook Master Association learned it too.